Welcome attendees to the U46 Board of Education meeting. The board will be coming into session in about 7 minutes. If you do have a request to speak, there's a form on the agenda that you can click your name, topic, and address and information like that, and we would be glad to call on you during the public comments portion. So if you do have a public comment, please make sure you visit the agenda, click on the form, and insert it before the start of the meeting. Thank you.
Check 1 2, check 1 2. Hi, Chief Lally.
Good evening again, and welcome to the U46 Board of Education meeting. The board meeting will be underway in about 3 minutes. If you are an attendee within the meeting and you would like to make a
get off the
comment,
internet?
please look at the agenda, and you can submit your public comment. You can insert your name and information in order to provide a public comment during the board meeting by clicking on that agenda link. And then after the strategic plan update, you will be called upon in the order in which your name is put into that form. Thank you. Madam President, I believe the 7 o'clock hour has arrived and we have a quorum of the board.
Okay, I believe you are right. So I will call the August 3rd, 2020 U46 Board of Education meeting to order. Roll call, please.
Mr. Deveraux?
Here.
Miss Owens? I'm sorry, Miss Noland?
Here.
Miss Owens?
Here.
Mrs. Porter?
Here.
Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Miss Thomas?
Here.
Madam President?
Here. And if people could rise to the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic
for which it
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice for all.
Okay, before we begin, I need to read a statement about why we're having a remote meeting. Governor Pritzker's COVID-19 Executive Order 45 extended modifications to the Open Meetings Act through August 22nd. This permits public bodies to meet remotely through electronic means. Based on current health concerns, I have determined that it is neither practical nor prudent to hold an in-person Board of Education meeting on August 3rd, 2020. Therefore, the meeting will be remote using a Zoom webinar in compliance with Executive Order and Public Act 101-640. The public is invited to join the Zoom webinar or watch a live stream of the meeting on YouTube. Please note that Superintendent Tony Sanders is present at district offices, while the board and remainder of the administration are participating remotely. Thank you. Okay, Mr. Sanders, strategic plan report.
Thank you, Madam President, members of the Board of Education. Every year, we bring forward to the Board of Education renewals for our school resource officer contracts with the villages of Streamwood, Bartlett, South Elgin, as well as the city of Elgin and the village of Bartlett. At the request of the board, of course, we knew that this year there would be additional inquiries and information that would be sought around our school resource officer program. And we've not provided an update to the board on this program for quite some time. So I want to remind the board that Pillar 2 of our strategic plan talks about providing a safe and welcoming environment for all of our schools. This, along with providing social workers, counselors, and many other resources, is one of the ways that we've approached this in the years past. With that, I'm going to hand it over to John Heiderscheit and he can introduce the rest of the participants. John?
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Madam President, honorable members of the board. Tonight with us are representing these middle school officers is Courtney Stoiber, who is a Teft Middle School resource officer from the Streamwood Police Department. With us representing some of the high school activities of a high school school resource officer in U46 is Rich Bosch. He is a detective from the Bartlett Police Department. And with us tonight is Chief Anna Lally. She is the chief of the Elgin Police Department, and she's here tonight to talk about what her 7 school resource officers do on a daily basis, and the police sergeant that they assign to the program to supervise it. So I'm going to give a brief presentation in the beginning to give some history about our school resource officers and just to give you some frame and what we're doing now, and a lot of bit about arrests that have occurred in our schools. So the history of the program, school resource officers, from what I can gather, date back to the 1980s, the middle 80s. Streamwood High School, Elgin High School, Larkin High School had school resource officers. In the middle 1990s, there was a bringing about of middle school police officers in school district U46. And as new schools came on board in the district, there was an addition to that program that was having an officer in each middle and high school. In 2006, when the Board of Education hired the position that I have the honor to serve in now, the the coordinator of school safety, that was the position at the time, was assigned to align this district resource to align the process and to grow its consistency among our schools for school administrators, even though it's four very different police departments. About 2 years later, we completed together through the School Safety Advisory Task Force, which is the police and fire departments and school administrators joining 3 times a year to talk about school safety, and the school resource officers who I've met with on a monthly basis to align and to talk about how do we improve our services to schools, to kids, and to our staff. In 2008, we completed the information sharing agreements, which are called the reciprocal reporting agreements, which allowed us to, by law, discuss and share information, because what happens to a student is not on the streets or in the community is not mutually exclusive to what happens to them in school, and vice versa. In about 2009, we were looking at the contracts, and we saw that we were the district was paying about a 75% to 100%. It was different for each police department. So what we did is we worked with the police departments to align that we're paying an equal rate depending upon their salary structure. And currently, the district pays about 55 to 60% of the cost of the officer, while the police department is funding about 35 to 40% of that cost. That's approximate, and it differs per police department. Like the city of Elgin, who's also putting a supervisor, and they pay for the full cost of their sergeant that's assigned to their program. And I talked about our bi-monthly meetings and our coordination and our consistency. So our structure today is that we moved away from just kind of letting the contracts go year to year, which was occurring back in 2006. And in about 2008, we moved to an annual renewal of the SRO contracts, which really gives us the ability to shift and to maintain our continuity with whatever's happening in the country, what's happening with policing, what's happening with community policing, how are we going, what are we doing. So annual contracts were instituted in 2008, and at one time we tried to shift to 2-year, and the police department said, no, we need to keep the annual contract running. We have a U46 job description. Much like all the job descriptions in U46, we have a U46 job description for our school resource officers, and that is built from the contract. So the duties from the contract become the job description here at U46 for our administrators to understand the role of the police officer and really what they're doing in the school, from new principals to principals that are seasoned and been around a while. Our police departments do have full supervision responsibilities for the school resource officers. They are not employees of the school district. So all of the equipment they're required, from their radio to their pens and pencils to whatever equipment they have and that they carry in their squad cars or on their person, is responsibility of the police department. We share in that responsibility by giving them office space, our school radio, and other equipment and access to some of the resources that we have, a key fob, and other access if they need to gain access to the buildings. Our SROs report to the principal. Really, that is their role, is that they belong to the principal in my mind, and I might be saying that a little wrong, but really they respond to the principal in what they're doing. But I also have an oversight role as the director of school safety and culture, and so we work together. We communicate, not as often as I'd like, but I would tell you that we communicate on a regular basis. There is a school resource officer in each middle school, each high school, and the Dream Academy Central Schools program share an Elgin police officer on the program here at the Educational Services building up on the 3rd and 4th floors. To become a school resource officer in all 4 of our police departments, and I know this to be common among police departments at least in our region, is I'll give you an example. The Canton Middle School officer, Laura Sedleski, retired this summer. And since she's retired, we have an opening at Canton Middle School. The process that Streamwood and our other police departments follow is that they actually have a posting for the police officers in their department that this is a specialty position. So an SRO is a specialty position, like a traffic officer, like a detective, and those types of areas, a rope officer, a specialty police officer. So it's a specialty position. And then once the posting is for a certain number of days by their contracts with their labor unions, then those applicants are brought forward. The principal, myself, the principal's team of administrators, whoever that is, and the police department's administrative team, then we interview the officers and make our selections accordingly. So there is a pretty in-depth, hearty, this is a very important position to the police departments, and it's a very important position to us. So in that, there is a very extensive process there. Each police department assigns a sergeant. So Elgin's not alone, but we have really the honor of having a sergeant assigned it, and I can call 24 hours a day. But each police department, South Elgin, Bartlett, and Streamwood, they also assign one of their command staff. It's usually the sergeant over the detectives or the commander over the detectives that is aligned for the school resource officer. So we have supervision oversight, we have program oversight, and we have collaboration in how we manage these programs. So the next slide. So the activities we're currently involved in early on in the beginning years, SRO, we didn't do everything right always, but we've certainly adjusted and changed. And an example would be that SROs, when I started, were involved with discipline. We were also involved with trying to stop fights and actually using the power of arrest to try to stop fights. And we have found that, and you'll see a slide in the short future here that shows that, you know, we did have an effort there and it didn't work, and we can't arrest our way out of this, if you will. But SROs being involved in discipline was something else that we found that it was problematic. So about 6 years ago, we actually wrote in contract language that the school resource officer is not to enforce the student code of conduct. SROs have been integral in managing our street gang issues in all of our communities. And I would be very clear and can give you some really intense examples of street gang activity that was plaguing our communities from the years 2006 to 2011 to 12, and the things that were going on in our communities with kids from our schools, and they were hurting each other, and extensive information, and we haven't heard about that recently. And so that's not knocking on wood, that's hard work, that's sharing information, that's being very intentional about helping kids make different choices about getting involved with gangs. Our SROs are experts in security and event management. They're involved with our football games, our basketball games, helping us manage and coordinate crowd control, giving us expert advice for our administrators to run those incidents, to run those events safely for all involved. They assist with our critical events, from our crisis response teams to drug incidents, to incidents where there may have been something terrible that happened to a student. They assist in all of those features of those events, and they provide information as necessary and needed. They work on their mentoring relationships with students. We ask them to be involved with some of the students that are really struggling. Even in these days of distance learning, our officers are working towards mentoring students, connecting with them online, visiting their homes, doing check for well-beings, home visits. We believe that we'll have some students not participating, and how will we work towards keeping those students engaged and connected to all of the resources that we have. They teach classes usually on constitutional issues, law, things like that kids are interested in. We certainly have stories where they're involved with, I'm sorry, not stories, but they're specifically involved with our random searches to prevent weapons and drugs in schools. And how that works is the officers are never involved with actually doing the searching until we might find something that is a contraband. But what they do is they stand by. So while we're searching lockers and checking book bags, or having dogs come in and sniff for drugs, or using our weapons prevention program with weapon search sweeps of students using handheld metal detectors, occasionally we do have something where we find something, and then the officer can quickly take possession and take control over that item that's of concern, and help us defuse the situation very quickly. Officers are mediators. They do work in restorative practices as certified juvenile officers in the state of Illinois, and they can help us with home visits whenever we might need them, and they occur. The training is not formalized currently in the contracts, but that is something that I've brought attention to, and every time that we have this conversation, it's pretty consistent with all of our command staff that we want to make sure that an officer is in the best position to do their work effectively with all kids. So they are Illinois Certified Juvenile Officers, which is a 40-hour course. National Association of School Resource Officers. There's a basic and advanced course there. Certified gang officers, some of them are not. That's not essential and crucial. The first two are. They are familiar with our crisis prevention training, our CPI training. There is a conflict with them taking and being certified like our staff are, but they do audit the course to understand how we respond in situations and what we would be doing. So the new contract that we're going to be asking the board to consider after we send it to the police departments is that we're going to be adding a section into the contract that says there's a state law that says the Illinois Training Standards Board will have specific training requirements in the 2021 year starting in January. So we're just going to write in there that is now the new standard for all SRO agreements. And in my final section here, I'm going to talk about arrests and the arrests that have happened in schools. This chart indicates arrests dating back to 2013-14, which is consistent with what you'll hear about a FOIA that was requested recently. So it was an opportunity to bring this information to you from that. 2013-14, you'd see we had 343 arrests, and you can see that number go down in number significantly. That's considering a lot of work we were doing to reduce exclusionary discipline out of school suspensions and the school to prison pipeline by finding better ways to help kids after they make bad choices. So in doing that, you can see the numbers as they stand there kind of throughout and we provide information of the ethnicity of the student. And the next chart is a bar graph with lines that gives them more of a visual here. So you can see the difference. In 13-14, we redefined, and that was from the U.S. Department of Education, from OCR, what an arrest means and what a law enforcement referral means. And we've defined that in our student code of conduct from that definition source. And continuing to 2014-15 to current 2019-20, you will see the bright green line there represents Hispanic students who were arrested, and the orangish brown line represents our African American Black students, and the white line and the others. So we are disproportionate in the area still of African American Black students being represented in our arrests. Much like other categories of discipline in U46 that we have concerns in that area. In the next slide, you'll see the age, and this is actually fairly consistent. This goes from 2013-14 to current. And what you're seeing here is the average age of, by percentage of students that are involved. So this goes in line with some of the programs and efforts that we're having in freshman success and the transition programs from middle to high school, and also our school culture and climate work that we're doing with the high schools in association with our department and Dr. Robin Barraza with student discipline, MTSS, Kathy Kettle, and Sam Ladeau. The next slide gives you a sense of the gender. So 67% male from that time frame all the way back to 2013-14 to currently today, to give you that just a general sense. And then the final slide I have here is showing you proportions of the incidents that the officers are involved in arresting. And these come from our behavior referrals. So in 2013-14, the proportion of students that were arrested for fighting, and that was 343 students, to 1920, where the proportion of students involved in fighting was pretty much the same, but it was only 36 students. So just giving you the reference that the students that do get arrested, these are for very serious offenses. And not just a simple fight, but we're talking fights with injuries where it causes significant disturbance, drugs, that would be distribution, and could be mere possession, depending on the substance involved. Physical battery of staff. I just want to mention in this that in 2015-16, our work in the student code of conduct, and I'll close with this before I introduce Courtney, is that we were seeing that we had the code of battery, and battery was a physical offense, and combined was battery to staff or student. And we were finding that it was best for us to differentiate those two incidents so we could see what was happening, and see it clearly. So that's represented in some of this information here, and then some of the information that was sent regarding your questions today, and the information that we sent along. So with that, I'm going to introduce Courtney Stoiber. She's been a Teft Middle School Resource Officer at Teft Middle School for 2 years. She's going to be entering her 3rd year with the Streamwood Police Department. Courtney?
Hi, thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you guys today. I wanted to be an SRO because there's a great opportunity to build relationships in the community. And those relationships don't just stop at the school, those extend outside of the building, and it helps us to deter incidents inside and outside of the school. I wanted to ensure the safety of students and staff members, and I wanted the opportunity to work alongside the school administration to address concerns, fights, narcotics, weapons, gang activity, to hopefully mitigate future incidents or those from reoccurring. Prior to joining the Teft family, I was a sworn officer at the Streamwood Police Department as of 2003. And some of the training I brought into the building was as a juvenile officer, a school resource officer through NASRO, and a crisis intervention team. And CIT is really important. It's highly focused on de-escalation and identifying persons in crisis, persons with mental or physical disabilities, persons on the autism spectrum, persons with mental illnesses, or other emotional needs. And it's about verbally counseling them through that crisis and referring them to staff or resources to better address their needs. On an average day at Teft, I'm downstairs by those front doors at 8 a.m. to greet every student that walks in that building. And then I've helped monitor the cafeteria and the hallways between passing periods. It's just constant interaction with the students. I'm complimenting them, I'm conversing with them, and I'm addressing concerns as they arise. I'm there to offer advice, to participate in mediations, to offer encouragement and understanding, and then I extend that to the families and the staff members in the building. I'll respond to any reports of threats or physical altercations, and also maintain ongoing communications with the police department. So I'll learn if an incident happened with one of my kids outside of the building. So if there's a resource that child needs inside the building, then I can make that connection. I'll also work with administration to coordinate safety drills, conduct safety and welfare checks, and really just be another adult inside the school, but also outside the school and in the community that's supporting and driving these positive interactions with our youth. All that comes around full circle to have a major impact on school safety, because if I can build these relationships, then as SROs, we can negate or just directly impact school safety. We can intervene because we can recognize when behaviors become abnormal. I understand staff members' roles in the building, and I understand their relationships with the kids in the building, which helps me make those connections when I see a child in crisis or somebody that's having a problem. In a nutshell, I just want to be proactive. I want to address the problems before they happen, and that should be our ultimate goal. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Courtney. Much appreciated. And Madam President, if I could next introduce our high school representative today. And Rich Bosch is the high school representative for our school resource officers today. He is the, next slide, Tony. Thank you. He is a detective from the Bartlett Police Department. He has served one stint of about 6 years as a school resource officer. I might have that wrong a little bit. He's been with us now for the last few years as a Bartlett High School school resource officer. Rich, if you could.
Yes, thank you, John. On behalf of Chief Ulrich and Bartlett Police Department, I'd like to thank the board for allowing me to speak. I've been with the Village of Bartlett for 26 years. The last 14 years, with a 2-year stint in investigations, I've been the school resource officer at Bartlett High School. Some of the training I have there is I have the juvenile course, the certification juvenile and advanced juvenile, the NASRO advanced NASRO training. I am trained in crisis intervention CIT training. I worked with the district and attending their CPI training, that John Heiderstert puts on for the staff and the deans and the DAs and the staff there. I do participate in that. Recently, I've been trained in threat assessment, the advanced threat assessment, and just recently last week, the digital threat assessment, and looking at kids who are in crisis to themselves or for others to get them resources and to see what kind of level they're on, to provide them the necessary resources they need and work together with the school and the resources they need. I was asked to be on an oversight committee with the district to oversee their policies and procedures on how they identify the students with threat assessments and come together and just make sure all the checks and balances were being taken care of. Part of de-escalation training, sensitivity training, bullying recognition, investigation, advanced read with interview and interrogations through Read Association, as well as the FBI, and of course the gang and drug certified through the state of Illinois. My typical day at Bartlett High School is I'm there at 6:40 a.m., there till the last kid leaves at 3:30 p.m. on the last bus. So I'm there every day, long hours, and I'm happy to do it. I wore a lot of different hats, and when I got into the school, it opened my eyes to see that the children, they're gray areas. And so, you know, it's just not black and white with children. You got to have that gray area and do what's best in the best interest of them or others. Some of the good things we've done at Bartlett High School is when I got in there, we were having a large amount of thefts in the locker room. So I came to the school, myself, the athletic director, as well as the principal and the deans. We came together on how we combat that. We put some things into place where we were able to limit that down to single digits, and we got it down to very minimal amount of thefts. Recently, I've been working with the dean's office. We just started a safety task force where we get a group of students together and give them a say. They have a say in their school. This is their school, so they have a say in it. And so we come together with them and we identify areas that may give a student anxiety. It may be the parking lot. It may be the second floor bathroom. It may be a hallway during passing period where then we can put our resources and be out there and see, and the kids just see us as a face, as someone to come up to, a trusted adult. And that has worked down because all our numbers were way down this year. You know, we didn't have any big events, and the kids really felt they took ownership of the school. So that was a really good thing that we want to build on, and we hope to build on it with other schools. I've worked on it with schools administration and school social workers on procedures on dealing with kids in crisis. How to work, you know, how to handle them, how to get their parents involved, how to give them the resources, and how to follow up with them. Not just to, you know, get them out of the school or give them the resources and turn your head. These kids need constant follow-up. So we're out there reaching out in the summer during the school year, just, you know, saying hi to them, knowing that our door or emails are always there. Other things that I've done is, you know, we coach, you know, making relationships, coaching the kids' events. I see the kids during homecoming, coaching the girls' powder puff, trying to teach them to play football, which is a lot of fun. But we work on them and making relationships with them. I invite other officers in and fire department and paramedics in for a government day where they're able to, you know, the students are able to talk to the, you know, the professionals about what they can do to go in that line of work. So it's what we do is it's just not a lot of going in and showing force. They see us as a human being. They approach us, and we make these long relationships with them. Like I said, I've been with them with the district, working hand in hand with the district for 14 years now, and the relationships and the bonds I made with some of the students are top notch. We also, with the drills that John mentioned, I bring in other officers in to observe the drills to give them recommendations. We do run, hide, fight drills or evacuation drills or severe weather drills. I'll bring officers in and we can just sit back and watch, and then we come together and say, okay, we may want to tweak it this way or maybe this way. And we come together and we do what's in the best interest of the school, the kids, the staff, and the community. So, you know, I love being at Bartlett High School, and, you know, I would love to invite the board in to come in and come say hi to me and see the kids and see us interact with the school kids any day. I appreciate your time and have a great night.
Thank you, Rich, very much. And Madam President and Board, our final speaker is Chief Anna Lally from the City of Elgin Police Department. Anna?
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak to the board. So I want to start out by saying that the Elgin Police Department, we have really had a great partnership with U46 for over 25 years. And so, John has been great in just working with the school resource officers and the police department. So we have a really great working relationship. The Elgin Police Department, we have a total of 7 school resource officers, along with a sergeant and also a lieutenant who will fill in if the sergeant is not available, but that sergeant is specifically dedicated to the program. So the school resource officers and the sergeant and lieutenant, they are all professionals who are committed to forming positive relationships in the school with the students and with the staff. Our officers are trained in fair and impartial policing, emotional intelligence, rapid deployment should some type of active threat occur at the school, and also crisis intervention training. And the sergeant of the school resource officers, she is also a trainer for the state of Illinois, and she specifically trains in verbal de-escalation and tactical response. So the quality of officers that the schools have, they are consummate professionals who are there to really have some meaningful impact with both students and staff. So I want to talk a little bit just about, from a kind of just a 30,000 view here about what the school resource officers do. The Elgin Police Department, our philosophy really ingrained in our policing is about education. It's about enforcement when it's appropriate, and then also about engagement. And that's something that we really pride ourselves on. And so the school resource officers are in the schools. And just to kind of give you some examples of what they do as far as when it comes to engagement. So several of our school resource officers run their own mentoring program where they are really taking the time, outside of school and in school to develop friendships and relationships with the parents, with the students, and really looking to, find a way for if there's something that's happening with the student to have a comfort level there that they feel that they can go and talk to the school resource officer, also being a role model and a mentor and guiding them in their careers and things that they want to do. So tons of mentoring programs. We do sports events, whether that's basketball or soccer, forming leagues and just going out with the students and the teachers and really being part of the school. For the past 5 years, we've also done a contest, a poster contest with all the middle schools for whatever the topic. It may be bullying, it may be traffic safety, but we have students who, draw a poster, and then we select the winner, and the winners get to be chief for the day. So they come down to the police department and they get to see a canine demonstration. They get to meet the officers, and they get really cool shirts that say chief for the day in the back. So, we really want to find a way for the students to, see us as people and not just, the uniforms that we wear. So tons of things that happen as far as with engagement. Education, the SROs are in the classrooms, and again, they're presenting on a variety of topics that are age appropriate. So that could be anything from bullying to internet safety to drug and alcohol awareness to traffic safety. Also, just having conversations with the students, on what we do, and I think that builds the foundation for trust and relationships, not only with the students but with the staff. And it is really that relationship between the principal and the school resource officer that sets the tone for the school. And so we are their resource, as well. Also, we do in the summertime, our school resource officers participate in a program called Kids United. And so all our school resource officers are diverted toward this program where we're currently doing it. We're doing a modified version, but we usually have between 50 to 200 kids participate. And really, the school resource officers are there to continue the relationships that they've formed, and then to be a constant presence and be a friend, and to make sure that, if there are some issues that are happening, with the student or at the home, that we are available. And the other thing too is, the school resource officers also act as the nexus between the police department and the schools. And with that comes a variety of social service programs, our Explorer program. So the school resource officer can also, use all the resources available to him or her, for the school. So we really pride ourselves on the engagement and education. When we do have to enforce, as John mentioned, all our police officers are wear body cameras, so that it allows for a level of transparency to see what occurs. And again, a lot of our enforcement is in a reactive, for a vast majority of the time, it is in a reactive capacity. So lastly, I think the just to sum it up, the relationships that the school resource officers have with both the students and the staff, I think it's the building that familiar bridge between people and ensuring that there's a climate that fosters partnership. And so our school resource officers are always trying to find new ways to be involved, whether it's through bringing a new training program or some type of engagement opportunity. Thank you.
Chief Lally, thank you so much. Rich and Courtney, thank you for your participation today. And the final, for the resource that the board has committed to and where you're committing your resources, these are the things that we're thinking about and actually starting in the last couple of years, and we're moving towards in the future. Expanding the mentoring with students, however we can do that. And there are stories where police officers are getting other police officers to help be mentors for kids, and as best we can connecting with kids. The See Something, Say Something, that's a Sandy Hook Initiative program. That's where the See Something, Say Something comes from. There's a group of parents in our area. So these are student-led violence prevention programs, really directed to reduce bullying, create ownership by students, and to build relationships. And our officers are helping to build those programs at a grassroots level. So students are leading that effort to grow that. We're going to continue our threat assessment and threat prevention. As some of the numbers that you've seen, that is something that we're very, very active in mitigating that from ever happening. You may have heard me talk about the annual safety training that I go around to the schools to talk about what we used to call lockdown, but we call that run, hide, fight now. Actually, that is based off of the Elgin Police Department's effort to bring ALICE training for citizens about how to mitigate a run, hide, fight situation and survive that situation as best possible. So we're asking our SROs to be more active in training our staff because they are the experts, and with that training, the same training that I have in that regard. And the Handle with Care program, Elgin was the first department to step into this. Handle with Care is it's becoming a national program. Started at a couple police departments, and now it's really getting some energy behind it. It's an excellent way to be a trauma-informed care community. And that trauma-informed care community is that when officers, not school resource officers, or they could be, but officers from the street would see that a student may have encountered a situation that would cause trauma or could cause trauma, we know that could result in an acute trauma experience the next day in school, where we might see an escalation. So the Handle with Care program is just kind of and it's not just kind of, it's a communication to say, handle with care today. And that's all the information that comes to us in that information sharing. So we're working towards a constant improvement of our services for students and for our staff. And with that, we conclude our presentation.
Thank you very much, Mr. Heidescheid, and thank you to Chief Lally, Officer Stober, and Officer Bosch. Do board members have any questions?
I do. Hi, this is Eva Porter. I want to say to all the officers, thank you so much for your service. I heard all of your training that you go through, and you might cover this, but I just want clarity because some of the titles of the training, I'm sure will incorporate some of this, but I just need you to kind of reiterate for me. I think my concern is that to make sure that we assure the parents and the students in lieu of everything that has been going on in the media lately, and the mindset that to some students, especially some communities of the Black and brown communities, that the policemen are not their friend. How are we, or how does the police department plan to address that, especially the SROs that come into the school? And what training, in-depth training, do you have that's ongoing that will help with the mindset of the African-American students and brown students, that they might feel that they are being discriminated against? And we can see from the data that they're the highest, not saying that it's not justified or not, but how do we break down that systemic barrier to dispel that they're being treated fairly, and what training is being taken place?
I'd feel remiss talking about the police training. So may I ask, Anna, would you mind?
You might have covered it, but you have different titles for the training.
Chief Lally?
Yes. So I think for the Elgin Police Department, all our officers are trained on fair and impartial policing. And so fair and impartial policing looks at implicit bias specifically. And we really look at the core issues that everyone has a bias, and that, how do you manage those biases and what do you do? So all our officers are trained. Last year and into the beginning of this year, we also did training on emotional intelligence. And so I think it's important that officers, recognize not only that, policing, and especially in the climate that we're in now, policing is making sure and ensuring that we are fair, that we're impartial, that there's transparency, that the voice of the students are heard. So here at the police department, we really do push that message through our engagement efforts too as well. That's something that we're known for. And so that philosophy transfers into the schools. And so I think that answered your question, maybe? Yes?
Yes. Will the training, in retrospect of what has happened recently, do you think the training that you already get, do you think that it addresses the situation that we find ourselves in right now in light of new findings?
So some of the things I think we always are going to continue to train, to continue to get better. So there's some initiatives here at the Elgin Police Department that we're doing specific on conversations involving race, policing, bias in policing. And so we've been working on that for the past year and a half. And so really, we've kind of set ourselves up in a position to really have some of those deeper conversations. And some of our school resource officers are involved in programs here at the police department that, encourages that deeper discussion. And so, yes, I think we're always going to be training. I don't think it's just we're done, check the box. It's a constant improvement. It's a constant analysis, assessment, constant feedback from our community. If we are falling short, we need to know where, and we need to know how to address it. So for me, it's just we're always in a constant state of motion, learning, engaging, and hoping that we're really working our best at, providing the best services to both the school and to the students.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Donna, did you have?
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the officers and the police chief, and of course our own John Heiderscheit. I've been around since 2013 when these reports started, and to see the difference in what we've done from back then to now, it makes me so proud of everyone who has been involved in this, and to see the differences that are happening. And I just have to thank all of you, including our other resource officers who aren't here tonight, but thank you, because you're doing a great job.
Sue, I've got some questions if no one else.
Kate, go ahead.
So I would like to reiterate a little bit too, some of the things that Eva was saying in terms of how our Black and Latino and other minority students being treated and all that. So thank you for answering those questions. Those were definitely among my questions. My other question is, on your slide here where you talk about the future of SROs, and to me, this kind of looks like a goal list, some of the things that are goals. There's not a single word about our special needs population on this list. And I'm a little concerned. At one point, someone mentioned tonight that we use verbal counseling, I believe is the word they used, with the list of students that included autism. Lots and lots of times, every kid with autism has a disruption in their language. That's part of the definition. And I can tell you from personal experience, my kid has a significant language disruption. If a police officer tells him to stop and put his hands up, my son is not going to do that. He literally does not have the language ability to understand that. And he's not alone. Our schools have a number of kids in that category. So, I mean, I don't necessarily know that I have a question at this point, but that needs to be a priority moving forward, is how are these officers encouraged to interact with kids with autism? And I know the training exists. My neighbor is a DuPage County Sheriff, and he went and did a training, and he was so excited to tell me about it. He literally rang my doorbell to tell me about it. So, like, moving forward, we need to make that a higher priority, that these kids, God forbid, a school shooting, God forbid, like our autism population, which is significant in all of our buildings, it's scary. It's really scary. So just moving forward, I really want to be sure that that we do that we make it a priority. And then just on top of all of that, the other question that I want us to consider kind of as a group is, how is a police officer better qualified to de-escalate a mental health crisis than a licensed clinical social worker or our school psychologist or a school nurse? And just moving forward, I want to be having that conversation. So thank you. And on top of it, thank everyone for their service. I met Chief Lawley many, many years ago at a Girl Scout meeting. I don't know if she remembers that. But thank you all very much for coming into our schools and caring about our students. That is definitely worthy of a thank you.
Ms. Thomas, I'll respond. I know John may want to follow up a little bit more on the training piece, but that is noted. And then I just wanted to also follow up to say, we recognize the need for social workers and counselors as well. This is not to say that we're minimizing the impact that social workers and counselors have on a child's life. Since evidence-based funding, we added back our 8 middle school counselors. That was the first investment we made. My first year in this role, we made sure every school had at least one full-time social worker. So we do take that very seriously, and we have been trying to lower those ratios as best we can. So I just want to make sure that the public knows that we are making investments in those areas as well. And then John, I don't know if you had a response to the other training question.
May I, Madam President, just a brief response, and not a response, but a conversation. What I think is key and specific is that I believe that our SROs, I know that our SROs have an awareness and know those students and know when to hand off and know when it's probably not right time for an SRO to be involved with that situation. I can't say perfection, but I know that, and we have these conversations at our SRO meetings, that the advantage that we have in school is time and resources, and we don't have to force any situation of any kind in a school. So what I'm trying to say is I believe that our officers know where ILP rooms are, where our special needs rooms are. They know those kids. They know the administrators and the staff that work with those students. So I'm not saying it's perfect, and I'm not saying the training is amazing, but I believe that knowledge is very powerful. And the second thing, I certainly do not want to purport or try to convince anybody that a police officer in de-escalating a situation is more qualified than a professionally certified psychologist or social worker. But in the field, sometimes they are in the moment, and then it's time to turn it over to somebody else. The advantage of working in the schools is that these resources are are connected, and we're working towards connecting them more and more. And it's not a goal, it's not a priority, it's a value for our communities. So I'm not purporting it's perfect, and I'm not purporting that every police officer or school administrator or school staff member is perfect, but I believe that power of relationships is what's key and specific in our knowledge. So we definitely will definitely have these notes noted for sure. And I'm interested where that officer went to that training in DuPage. So I'll follow up with you on that one.
Yeah, definitely. And I just want to push back a little bit, John. Not every student who has autism in U46 is in an ILP classroom. A significant portion of them are in gen ed classrooms. And it's not enough to know where they exist. Like, they need to understand that, you know, when it comes to verbal language, short and sweet is what you need. Like, if you give a kid a 4-minute dissertation on why they should stop doing it, and that kid is autistic, you lost them 30 seconds in. So we need to really focus on that training.
Thank you.
So I have a question.
Go ahead, Veronica.
I wanted to know a little bit about the consistency across the board with the SROs. We heard a lot from Chief Lally about the group from Elgin, and I know most of, I think, our SROs come from Elgin, or the majority of them, I'm not sure. But I wanted to know if other SROs from other communities wear body cameras. That was one of my questions. I know Elgin does. And then also about the training. You know, I heard so many good things, especially about relationships and connecting with community. And I wanted to know if that is also happening with the other SROs through their police departments and their communities. And if yes or no, how are we overseeing that? You know, I heard you say something about SRO meetings, but you know, if it's one SRO officer from one community and there are no others from that police department, how are we ensuring they're at that same level as the other SROs, at the level that we want? That's my question.
Sure thing, and thanks for the question. I'll call upon maybe Courtney and Rich in just a moment if you could elaborate a little bit more on the training from your department. First, there's 2 officers from South Elgin, 2 officers from Bartlett, 3 officers from Streamwood, and the 7 SROs from Elgin. So the 4 departments to kind of give you the scope. The training, like I said in the beginning, we don't have it formalized in the contract. It's difficult to do because different police departments have different resources and are different places. But with the Illinois State Board Training Board basically formalizing that at a minimum, we're working from that and building that into the contracts. And you don't have a single chief that's going, "Ooh, that's a bad idea." No, it's a very good idea to bring that training forward. Actually, we were having these discussions on our weekly COVID meetings, and through April and through March, we made this part of our meetings. Well, I made it part of our meetings because I had the chiefs in my purview, if you will. So it's very, very important that our officers are properly trained. People are properly trained. So exacting the different resources from the different departments, no, I don't have that. Building that in the contracts and making sure that's in your view and what the board seeks, that's what we want to make sure that you're comfortable with and responding to what you need there, and what we recommend. Body cameras are the only department I know of having body cameras in this area is the Elgin Police Department. But we did write into the contract the ability to have body cam. So when we do the contracts, what you see is that if Elgin has it, we write the contracts so they can all have it. Does that make sense? We do it that with the IGA with our school cameras too, is that if the police departments get this technology and they go that direction, we've already vetted the language, if you will, in the contract to do that. So I don't know of body worn cameras at the other police departments yet, but I might be corrected here in just a minute. Yes, so it's not an exacting procedure right now. We're building towards that because it's needed. It's needed. Courtney, could you reference any other training that we're not talking about or referencing here, or body cameras?
But we don't have them yet. I think it's something that may be coming down eventually for a lot of the suburban departments. As far as training go, it's like you said, there's the state mandates, and we have to meet these mandates annually, and so many hours have to go into updates in civil rights or civil law, constitutional law, cultural competency, procedures, use of force. Obviously, we do rapid deployment training, which I know was mentioned, but the big push across the state has been CIT, although I don't think it's mandatory. But between the training that we do get at the police department, and then we have to be a partnership with our administration. We have to be a partnership with you. So that kind of keeps everybody on the same page, working toward the same goal, which is to solve the problem before it happens and to mediate. So we don't have to worry about a lot of this stuff because we're working on that together.
Thanks, Courtney. Rich, anything additional from Bartlett?
Yeah, just to elaborate on what Courtney said, is that it's also consistency. I know as Bartlett, my chief speaks with Chief of the Alley and the Chief of Streamwood and Chief of South Elgin. We're all together doing the same type of training. So we do have consistency across the board. When we are doing the trauma-informed care training with either CIT or CPI or sensitivity training, you look in that classroom and there's my other 7 SROs that I work so closely with. So we're all in the same training, we're all working it. And John, your monthly meetings that we have, we have an open dialogue, we have an open discussions about it. So we are on the same page and we are working hand in hand, and our phone lines are always ringing in case someone has a question.
Thanks, Rich.
Other questions?
Sue, if I may, John here.
Sure, go ahead, Jen.
First off, again, I echo Donna's comments before. It's great to sort of see the results and the progress, right? The number of arrests, our work on the, discipline plan and code of conduct, the trauma-informed care training, et cetera. So real pleased with all that. And thanks for everybody, all the speakers tonight for what you do and, your reasons for doing it. I would note that there were a series of questions that were posed via email, and those a lot of great responses in there covering policies and protocols, and as Superintendent Sanders mentioned a minute ago about recent investments and how we are seemingly trying to balance, the use of SROs, but at the same time increasing, social workers and other types of care that the students get. One thing that popped out to me in that I had one question. And again, I'm really pleased to see the number of arrests so far down. That's really, when we talk about that, the pipeline to prison kind of concerns, seeing those numbers down is really reassuring. Regardless of whether there's an SRO in the school or not, as I understand it, there are certain requirements that certain things get reported to the police. Is that correct?
Yes, state law requires drug offenses and to be reported. Not necessarily do we request them to act upon it, nor can we be a complainant on that. Even in a fight, we're not, an administrator doesn't say, officer, arrest those kids. It has to be on the terms of the officer doing the investigation themselves. Another area is weapons. And while weapons offenses are required to be reported to the police departments, your local police department, and then in our reciprocal reporting agreement are school safety situations, and that by agreement is required, and that agreement is governed under state law.
So yeah, that's good to understand. Again, we the number of arrests is down, but again, regardless of whether there's SROs present or not, there will still be, information sharing as required by law. And again, I can sit here all day and say I'm pleased with the progress. Is there any? And again, we don't want to survey people to death, but to get a student perspective, obviously we've got one student, board representative here, but I'd be curious. And again, I've known Officer Bosch for the 10 plus years, every event that I've ever been at the high school, I see him, says hello. He's present all the time. So I have seen him in the field and appreciate the efforts there. But is there a way we could get student perspective on this? They're the ones who interact with the SROs on a day-to-day basis. Do they see the value? Do they see the relationships being built? Do they feel threatened or what? That's really, my biggest question or concern.
So, Tony, sometimes you want to answer those, but I'll just start by saying, really that's the push for the student programs of violence prevention, the student, how do we get student voice? How do SROs encourage student voice in the conversation? That's a national conversation about violence prevention, which starts with bullying, which has resulted in some cases that we've seen around the country, and we certainly don't want that to happen here. Regarding survey of kids feel comfortable or they feel fearful of an officer, I don't believe we've done that, but with the groups that we're doing in secondary and those larger groups that of kids that we're bringing together to having those conversations, I think that we're certainly moving in that direction.
Yeah, I would just add, and maybe Olivia would like to weigh in on this because she's been to several of the student summits. While we've never explicitly asked about school resource officers, certainly supports within a school building, which could include the SRO, has been discussed many times by our student advisors, and they've given us advice. On top of that, we do the Illinois 5 Essentials survey, which does have some questions related to safety at school, but it's also more the to and from journey to school, I think, isn't it, John? So there is some data we might be able to pull from 5 Essentials and take a look at that as well. Mm-hmm. Olivia, anything you want to add from being at the summits?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, personally, I don't feel threatened by our SROs, but I do want to say, first of all, I am not a person of color, and I am not a victim of the systematic racism across the country. So I cannot speak on behalf of the minority students in our schools and how they feel towards our SROs. But as far as during our summits, I can say that students do feel, I guess they don't understand the full thing around having the officers being in full uniform. Because I feel like seeing an officer and trying to build that connection can often be a little intimidating sometimes, seeing them having all of their items on there and bulletproof vests. I can see how that would be intimidating sometimes. And yeah, I would say that's pretty much it from my perspective. I personally have not been able to, but I haven't had any instances where I've had to talk to our SRO. The SRO at my school was unfortunately injured trying to break up a fight. So we've had a couple, I believe. So unfortunately that is our situation. But as far as anything else, that is all I have to say. But I do agree, Mr. Devereaux, having a survey sent out would be a really, really good idea to get the perspective from minority students, especially.
Or a focus group in some way, just to get some additional feedback in your, maybe it is at the next summit, you make it a specific topic of conversation. Again, we can survey people to go crazy. So.
Definitely, that's a great idea, and I will totally add that to my list of things that hopefully we can put on the agenda for our next summit.
Yeah, and I appreciate their perspective. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Sue, I have some questions.
Sure, Melissa.
So on slide 10, which is the arrest by behavior events, hold on just a second. So are these arrests that are shown here, are those arrests that are just made by SROs? Are there other arrests that are happening at the school that maybe the school did the referral or somebody else did the referral?
These are, I'm not sure I understand what you mean by somebody else did the referral. I don't know.
So I guess the amount of arrests that have been made at schools, all of those arrests have been made by the SRO. There isn't anybody else that made a referral to
Okay.
prompt a student being arrested, like in a truancy event.
So can I say that, do I know that an SRO was involved every time, or was it a patrol officer because an SRO was at court or something? That's what I can't say because I'm not sure. What I do know is all of these, when a student is arrested, there is a button that's clicked in the Infinite Campus. Just like if there was a body worn camera used, the administrator would click a button in the behavior referral in Infinite Campus. So that's where that information is derived from. The student, if it's arrested, and arrested means that the student was taken from our care during our school day. If that was to occur, that button would be clicked as arrest by definition in the Student Code of Conduct and federally. And if the student was referred for law enforcement referral, no removal of that student from our care, but there was some kind of follow-up that the officer did, that's a law enforcement referral. So these are specifically the arrest in our system. So we know that these are incidents that came from us.
Okay, so they are arrests that were made when a student was on school property?
I don't know that I can accurately tell you that everyone was on school property. I don't have that. I know that as a result of being in a school setting under the Student Code of Conduct, that could be off property, involved with a field trip, that could, and so that would be a very rare instance if that was to occur. But these are school related incidents, behavior events that resulted in arrest.
Okay, so on those bar charts, you show the different categories of arrests. That is a full and inclusive list of why students were arrested. There aren't any other reasons in that list for why students may have been arrested.
So there was a few that I clicked off because they showed up once in 7 years or twice in 7 years, and the percentage was below 2%. The list became so long that it didn't fit on one slide. So there were a few. There was also an administrative erroneous. There was there's a couple that I did not include because they occurred once or twice in 7 years, and I took some notes on what that was. So I can articulate that back to you. It just was insignificant in the number over the 7 years.
Okay, all right. Do we, with the SRO program, I have a couple questions that kind of tie back a little bit to the contracts that we make with the police departments. Do we receive, how are those funded? Are we receiving any grants from the federal government or from state government to help cover the cost of these SRO contracts?
No.
Okay, so this is funded out of our general funding stream. There's no specific grants that we're receiving for this.
No, and the only grants that are for school resource officers was when you're adding. So if you're adding a school resource officer to a program in a community, that's under the COPS program. It's the only program I know of that would help you with that. And it's a 3-year grant for only $125,000 worth of 3 years of funding. So it's money, but it's not a lot of money.
Okay. On slide 3, which is titled SRO structure, and I appreciate the conversation about the shared interview process, and that we're taking a holistic approach to integrating an officer between the administrators at the school and the police department and the safety department. In looking at the presentation, I went back and some of my research and looked at the different contracts that we approved in 2019. The Elgin contract, well, let me back up. The South Elgin contract is one of the ones that I looked at, and on there in section 4, it says that the school and the district and the department have a collective consensus on determining the who is suitable for being an SRO. On the Elgin contract, it does say that the chief has sole determination of the contract, and there wasn't any language about there being any kind of consensus between the team at the school. So just want to make sure that that is addressed in the next round of contracts, and that we have similar language on all of those contracts. And I don't know if there's a reason why the Elgin contract is different at this point than the South Elgin contract.
I don't believe it says sole determination. I believe it says final determination. So the how we proceed is that we provide a recommendation. We'd like 1, 2, or 3. I might be wrong here. I haven't looked at that specific language in a few weeks. And then there are sometimes reasons why, and I don't get to know these reasons. It's a personnel issue at the police department, and sometimes that's dependent on the size and the availability of SRO, the number of candidates, if you will.
John, if I could just add to that real quick.
Thank you.
So the process, I ultimately have the end say, but I don't sit in the interview. So it's the school personnel, and then the sergeant, the lieutenant, and so whatever, whoever's name they decide is the person, that officer may have some type of disciplinary matter that the sergeant's not aware of. And so that's why it comes through the chain of command, so that if there's something that we know, there might be an issue, we don't want to give the school that person knowing that. So I don't sit in the interviews. We trust the judgment, obviously, of the sergeants, the lieutenants, and then the school. They have a huge say, because that's, the school resource officer, they have they have their bosses, and then when they're in the school, they have their bosses, which is, the principal. So.
Okay, I appreciate that. I want to make sure that when we do the next round of contracts that I think it's important to say in there that we do expect that there's that collaboration between all of the members of the team. It doesn't say that in the Elgin contract, so I just want to make sure that that is something that is said explicitly. I think that's important to have in there, but I do appreciate the follow back on that. It does say, and this kind of goes back to all of the different contracts, and we do say in this presentation, John, that you gave, that the officers, the SROs, are responsible for enforcing the laws and the municipal ordinances. It says that in the contracts, but we also say that SROs are not disciplinarians, right? And that they are not going to enforce a student code of conduct. But there are times when those two things are one and the same, right? Where there is a municipal law, or there's a regulation or whatever that also is something that is part of our code of conduct. I can think of something, maybe a student comes to school under the influence of marijuana. Obviously that's against municipal ordinances, but it's also in our code of conduct. So how are we delineating when it's appropriate for an officer to be part of that situation, and when is it appropriate for them not to be, just because it actually is a student code of conduct issue that we're dealing with? And how do we differentiate between the two in practice?
There's many things in the student code of conduct, from weapons offense to drug distribution to hitting another person, to causing a disruption and being involved in fight or disorderly conduct. Those kinds of things can be a law violation too, can be. In our reciprocal reporting agreement, we share information regarding school safety issues. Some fights can be school safety issues, some maybe are not. The significant shift with cannabis. Right now, the possession of cannabis is not a criminal offense unless it reaches certain parameters. I don't know all these facts, but if we have drugs in schools, the state law says that we share information with the police department. I think the important thing is that it used to be years ago that we had a school resource officer and a school administrator doing the investigation in tandem at the same time, asking the same types of questions to a student and their family. That has shifted when we shifted from the discipline, and we've made sure that we shift. So we do our investigation as a school district, and then report to the school resource officer. Sometimes it happens very quickly in the moment and the officer is aware, but we ask that our investigations become very separate. So the police officer doing their investigation may have to re-interview somebody that we've already interviewed, or interview us about what our findings are. As best we can, we separate those two situations. So if the police officer is finding that a law violation occurred based on their certification in the state of Illinois and their training, they're acting on behalf of being a police officer. Is that helpful in separating the two?
It is. I appreciate that explanation, because I think it is helpful to know that we are, that there's that our investigation is in some ways separate from what is a law enforcement investigation. One of the things that I remain concerned about, and I appreciate, just as my other board members have voiced, that I appreciate the work that our SROs do. It's obvious that there is a lot of work that has gone into reducing the law enforcement ramifications for our students. And I know that in listening to the officers, I appreciate the obvious care that you show for our students. I remain concerned about some of the language, I think, that we use in the contract, and some of the ways that, to me, language matters, and some of the ways that we are maybe putting out into the world how we view the SRO program. And just as one example, when we, in that section 4.2, when we talk about the duties and the responsibilities of the SRO, the very first one is enforce all laws and municipal ordinances to coordinate our efforts to provide a safe and nurturing school environment. So, the first word is enforce, right? And that concerns me, because it's saying that we view SROs having a certain job. One study that I read highlighted the intergovernmental agreement from Denver School District, and their approach is a little bit different. The first line of their SRO responsibilities is differentiate between disciplinary issues and crime problems and respond appropriately. To me, that has a different feel to it. The third item on their list is understand that the district has adopted a discipline policy that emphasizes the use of restorative approaches to address behaviors and is designed to minimize the use of law enforcement intervention. And I looking at the two approaches of those different contracts are different. Theirs takes more of a memorandum of understanding, an MOU approach, whereas ours is more of that traditional intergovernmental agreement approach from the way that I read it. I would like to see us emphasize that we are looking at SROs as a resource and not as an enforcement tool. And to me, the contract right away reads that they are an enforcement tool. Whether or not that's our practice or not, that's how I interpret reading the contract. Does that make sense?
Sure, absolutely.
I mean, we can certainly look at that. I'd like to remind the board that the contract renewal process requires not just what we want in the contract, but also what our municipalities want to see in the contract as well. So we would have to certainly have conversations with them. I'd also like to note that there's not one officer on here or any one of our school resource officers that ever wants to arrest a student, ever. And so when you see those numbers come down, and John, I'm going to pick on you a little bit to talk a little bit about when we introduced the Third Millennium program for drug and other offenses that previously could have gotten a student arrested, but because we internally have resources to support the students, that's one of the reasons they would much rather us take those and deal with them rather than make it an enforcement issue. Can you just briefly touch on that and some of the other efforts in that area?
Sure. Back in 2013, the third Millennium Program is something I actually have experience with back when I was a juvenile officer and also a school resource officer. And it wasn't an online program. It was actually done through the courts in Cook County and Lake County. And it was a program that was instituted for cannabis offenses and theft offenses that worked with students it's a restorative practices type approach, but also informational and teaching. That did show and indicate that when students went through those programs, the recidivism rate for those involved was significantly reduced, almost drastically reduced. And it's about teaching, it's about learning, it's about self-assessing and where you stand. And it was in person back in the day in the 90s. I'm old. When we introduced it in 2013 here, there was a price cost with that program of $60. So if we referred a student to that, it became prohibitive in cost, but we still had the program and we've had it around since about 2013. And then last year, we have funded the program to be where it's not cost prohibitive. So every student that would be involved, and they've expanded the program, it's online learning. It's online self-assessment, and there's actually a test that the student would take to certify that they've taken the program that gets sent back to the school administrator. And these are on drugs, advanced drugs, relationships, bullying, and there's a cadre of courses that we've actually built into our staff guide of the student code of conduct, and articulated which offenses would then correlate with that third millennium online course. There's also a parent component to that, which would then involve and engage the parent. And there's also a parent informational program for that. So we believe that the police departments refer those kids back to our administrators to then institute that program. And we also give our SROs access to that. So if the officer decided that in their own investigation that drug offense should result in a law enforcement referral to take a third millennium course on drugs or what have you, the officers have that ability to do that. So we believe that's also helping us in helping kids and helping families and helping parents with situations that their kids might be involved with.
Thanks, I appreciate that. That's really great information to have as well. And I'm just gonna, reiterate what other board members have said, that really my feeling that training is of the utmost importance here, and I really look forward to seeing that delineated out better in the next contracts. I will say that the U.S. Department of Education has listed out a bunch of items that they feel are, things that should be considered as part of the comprehensive training that all SROs should undergo. Students' rights and update legal information is one of the primary ones. It's been spoken about before about how to work with students with disabilities and special needs, limited English proficiency, LGBTQ issues. All of those are again, really important things that we need to make sure that we are covering. And I don't know, I know that the police departments are responsible for getting their officers some of this training, and I don't know, to what degree we are offering training as well when we have that available and our SROs are able to take part in that. But just looking again at the slide where we delineate out how the ethnicity of the arrests that we're making, cultural competency has to be up there in priority as well. We have to keep that first and foremost in our mind, because obviously that it's an area that we're struggling with. And while the number of arrests are thankfully far, far, far down from what they were in 2013, the fact that those arrests are still heavily weighted towards students of color is a major concern.
And thank you for that. I'd just like to note that the officers respond to our reports, and with officers, I believe that we should also focus on our own administrators with the same level of training. That has to be our requirement too, and we have to dedicate resources to do that for all of us.
John, can I add something real quick?
Oh, absolutely, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention too, I don't know if I mentioned it at the beginning or not. All of our school resource officers, they receive, they're part of the department still, so they go through our in-service trainings. And then they also receive additional training that, they will go to different places. But last year in our in-service training, we did cover autism training. We also covered LGBTQ. And then we also covered training for those who may be hearing impaired. And I did mention, I think at the beginning, the fair and impartial training that all of our officers go through. So I wanted to make sure that you guys, obviously Elgin is different than some of the other departments just based on resources. So, the officers there, I'm sure, are receiving the same type of training. I don't know what the frequency is, but, I just wanted to mention that we do. It's not just they're in this position of a school resource officer and they don't have they're still attached to the department and go through the same thing that all officers do. So I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, thanks. I appreciate that.
And just for the record, John, I want to thank you and Tony. I submitted 12 questions and I don't need to bring them up, but you answered them. But thank you so much. I hope that you will be intentional with the questions and the response that you gave me to implement those things that you can to make a difference in what the plan was before and what the new plan going forward would be. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our officers and our chief who are here tonight. We really appreciate your coming and we appreciate what you and all the other SROs do. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you to all of you. Much appreciated.
All right, next item on the agenda is comments from the audience. Mr. Sanders, have we had any email? I didn't see any emails listed.
Yes, we have one public comment. So I'll ask Ruby to read into the record our public comment spiel, and then we'll call on that public speaker.
Hi, good evening and welcome to the Board of Education meeting. We are now at the public comment portion of the meeting. Attendees wishing to make a public comment tonight were asked to complete a request to speak card form in advance and were then provided with a webinar ID number to call in promptly at 7 p.m. tonight, Monday, August 3rd. As always, speakers will be given 3 minutes to share their comment. The board listens to the speakers but does not respond to individual questions or comments during the meeting. A written response will be mailed to the speaker if requested on the form. Those who provided a public comment but chose not to speak publicly in the meeting were asked to submit an email to board@u-46.org. Those emails were posted on the board agenda for public viewing. Buenas noches y bienvenidos a la reunión de la Junta Educativa. En este momento abrimos al público la oportunidad de hacer comentarios. Los asistentes que deseaban hacer un comentario público esta noche se les pidió completar un formulario de solicitud para hablar antes de la reunión y luego se les proporcionó un número de identificación de la reunión en línea para llamar a las 7 p.m. Lunes, el 3 de agosto de 2020. Como siempre, los oradores dispondrán de 3 minutos para hacer sus comentarios. La Junta Educativa escucha preocupaciones y preguntas, pero no da respuestas durante la reunión. Si solicitó en el formulario recibir una respuesta, se le enviará por correo. Se pidió a los que proporcionaron un comentario público, pero decidieron no hablar públicamente en la reunión, que enviaran un correo electrónico a board@u-alto46.org. Esos correos electrónicos se publicaron en la agenda de la Junta. Gracias.
And as we enter public comments, just to reiterate, Madam President said at the top that the central office is open. There is somebody sitting downstairs waiting for any participants to arrive, and nobody has arrived for public comments downstairs. With that, we have Cheyenne Ward is our one and only speaker this evening. Mrs. Ward, you have 3 minutes now with the board. Cheyenne Ward, can you unmute you should be able to unmute yourself. Cheyenne?
I see Cheyenne, but she's still muted.
They tell them to go to the phone. Go to the phone.
Cheyenne, you're very distorted.
Use the phone number.
Good evening, everyone. Today, I would like to discuss how our district is responding to what is going on right now. Students should have the option whether they go back to school or not in the fall. Some people may think that masks work and some people may not, but students should always have the option to decide. For students that are more afraid, they can stay home and learn online. And for students that would like to go back full-time, there should be an option whether you want to wear a mask or not. As the facts show, there is hardly more danger from coronavirus than there is from the flu or other diseases. There have been other, some more serious diseases in the past where school has not been shut down and no ridiculous and unworkable precautions were required. The number of cases is only increasing due to the rapid appetite to test in order to maintain the crisis and keep the story alive. Just today, I heard a typical news story about coronavirus. The news reporter passionately emphasized the cases of the virus and the governor's new dictates concerning the rise in cases. Then, very dispassionately, at the end, the reporter states the death rate is actually going down. I care about the well-being of everyone just as much as you all do, but the mask isn't something that will help students. You are breathing in all of the air that you breathe out, which makes you even more sick by breathing in all of your own germs. We always try to say that it protects others, but microscopic germs get through the mask quite easily because of the tiny holes in the mask. The mask will be a considerable health risk for students while playing sports, especially on account of the high-intensity activities while you are breathing hard. This is why we should make it an option and not a requirement for students to wear masks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
And that was the only comment, Mr. Sanders?
That was the only comment submitted.
Okay, moving on then, other business. Board member and superintendent update. Does anyone have an update? I actually have a couple. I had the honor of attending the new teacher orientation today. It was a Zoom meeting, not surprising in this day and age, but there were, I think, about 130, 140 people there, Mr. Carpenter, Dr. Carpenter, sorry. And it was very enjoyable to see all these very young faces on Zoom. Dr. Lance,
Did we lose?
I think we lost Sue.
Sure.
So I was also on the new teacher orientation. I think she was saying that Dr. Lance did a quick overview of the district and our equity work and walked us all through the data. Sue, you're back, so I'll let you take back over.
Need to unmute.
You're unmuted. You're muted.
all right, here I am. Okay, let's try again. But yes, Dr. Lance, I really appreciated that and enjoyed that presentation. And then I've also been sitting in on some of the discussions on reopening. And I want to thank all the committees who have been just working so hard on all these different things that have to get done for the remote learning and eventual hybrid learning to happen. So again, thank you to all of our staff and administrators. Any other updates?
Could I add a few?
Sure.
Certainly we're going to have a full update to the board on April 17th when we come back for our next board meeting, which also is the first day of our teachers are back for their professional development. Actually, teachers have been doing their professional development all summer. Canvas has been an opportunity to have multiple sessions available for teachers to engage in. And so many of our teacher friends are putting together small group gatherings and doing their own learning on their own. So we appreciate all their efforts. When we do come back, we will be having some more focused professional development on distance learning using this as an anchor resource. Thank you to Trish Rhodes, Celia Banks, and the entire CNI team for all the work they put together in putting together professional development opportunities. We also did the survey of families and staff. Those surveys closed out on Friday. It's too early for me to share anything about the results of that yet. We need some time to go through those, but certainly the surveys will drive our next steps as we move forward. And finally, one of the big issues that we continue to hear is childcare. So Dr. King, along with some other groups, are working to still provide opportunities for childcare, and we'll be getting more information out as quickly as we can.
Okay, next is FOIA request, Mr. Sanders.
Yes, there are 3 Freedom of Information Act requests before the board this evening. They're posted also on board docs and will be posted on the district website this week. I can answer any board questions.
Any questions?
Yeah, I just have a quick question. This second one, specifically asking about school resource officers, the information that was shared with this individual is what we saw tonight, pretty much, right? Okay, thank you.
Yep. And we also provided that raw data to the board when that request went out, just in case it ended up in the media before we did our presentation.
Okay, next item, consent agenda, Mr. Sanders.
On the consent agenda, we have personnel report and workers' compensation cases, minutes of the board meeting, July 20th, 2020, termination of Carlos De Jesus, groundskeeper, contract renewal for plant operations for HVAC service plan, contract renewal for curriculum instruction for New Zella, contract renewal for curriculum instruction with Gale Cengage databases and ebook collection for grades K through 12, contract renewal for curriculum instruction with Turnitin, contract renewal for specialized student services with Corbold Behavioral Consulting, contract renewal for specialized student services for occupational therapy services, a contract renewal for specialized student services for reading mastery and corrective reading, a contract renewal for specialized student services for school psychology services, contract renewal for specialized student services for school social workers, contract renewal for specialized student services for speech language therapists, and that rounds out the consent agenda.
Hey, are there any items on the consent agenda board members would like to have removed? Okay, hearing none, could I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. This is Veronica Nolan.
Second, this is Melissa.
Any discussion or questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Devereaux,
Yes.
Ms. Noland,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mrs. Porter,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Thank you. Madam President,
Yes.
motion approved 7-0.
Discussion action, Mr. Sanders?
Our first item under discussion action are itemized bills for August 3rd, 2020. Administration recommends the Board of Education approve the list of bills in the amount of $16,729,302.02. And if you have questions, Mr. Burnage is with us this evening.
Hey, could I have a motion to approve the list of bills in the amount of $16,729,302.02?
So moved. This is Veronica Nolan.
Second.
Second.
Any questions? Roll call, please.
Mr. Devereaux,
Yes.
Ms. Noland,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mrs. Porter,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Thomas.
Yes.
Madam President,
Yes.
motion is approved 7-0.
Next item is CAC update. I'm not sure there's any CAC people on. Okay. I should note, I believe we're having a meeting with the chairs of CAC tomorrow to discuss the coming year. Okay, other business, Mr. Sanders.
Under other business, our first is the secondary schools financial report for the fourth quarter. Mr. Burnage is here to present.
Thank you. Tonight, we have the secondary schools financial reports on activity accounts for the fourth quarter, which is April 1st to June 30th. The balances have decreased for almost all the schools, mainly due to the schools remitting instructional materials fees, athletic participation fees, and other fees collected at the schools back to the district. The total balance of all the high school and middle schools is $2,953,097.28. For the quarter, the balances have decreased by $1,049,253. And that's typically what we see in the last quarter as funds raised earlier in the year get spent down, and then other funds that were collected at the school during the year get returned to the district. If there's any questions, I could answer them at this time.
People have any questions?
Quick question here. I presume a number of fees and related items were refunded as a result of school closing. Did those come out of these accounts or from the district? Those have all sort of been settled at this point?
So the fees that we refunded during the fourth quarter, like for parking permits, those fees would have come out of, if they paid them into school, then the school had did the refund for those. Fees that were paid online were refunded online the same way. Electronic payments that come from campus come right to the district's bank account, whereas the number of other fees get paid directly at the school. But either way, they are netted out of these accounts.
Good, thanks.
Any other questions? Okay, next item.
Our next is the administrator and teacher salary and benefits report. Annually, we are required to present this to the board. If you have questions, Ann Chan, Assistant Superintendent for HR, and Dale Burnage should be able to answer any questions. Essentially, what this is an annual event in state law. We have to upload all of our information around all of our teachers and administrators into a state portal called IWAS. That is then downloaded to our Regional Office of Education. They give it back to us for us to post for you review and approval, and then we post it on our website pursuant to state law. This is, again, an annual event, but we are pleased to answer any board questions.
Are there any questions from the board? Okay, next item. Work session.
Work session for contracts over $25,000. Our first is a contract renewal for food and nutrition services with Heartland School Solutions. Joining with this presentation is Mr. Phelps, Senior Business Official, and Ms. Hildreth, Director of Food and Nutrition Services. Administration recommends approval of the contract renewal with Heartland School Solutions for 5 years in the amount of $360,756 and request authorization for district administration to execute related documents. This expenditure will be charged to the educational fund and will be included in the budgets for all of those fiscal years.
Are there any questions? Okay, next item.
Our next is a contract renewal for business services and financial operations for Microsoft Dynamics GP 2016. Mr. Burnage can also answer any board questions in addition to Mr. Phelps. Administration recommends approval of the contract renewal with Unified Business Solutions in the amount of $31,431.28 and requests authorization for district administration to execute related documents. This expenditure will be charged to the educational fund and is in the budget.
Are there any questions? Okay, final item.
Our final is a contract renewal for specialized student services for Embrace IEP 504. Dr. Satterwhite joins us tonight if the board has questions. Administration recommends approval of the contract renewal with Embrace IEP in the amount of $54,460 and requests authorization for district administration to execute the documents. This expenditure will be charged to the educational fund and is included in the budget.
Are there any questions? All right, since that is the last item, can I have a motion to move into closed session to discuss individual student disciplinary matters, pending probable or imminent litigation, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors in a park, recreational, or educational setting, or specific volunteers of the public or legal counsel of the public body, the purchase or lease of real property for the use of the school board, the setting of a price for the sale or lease of real property owned by the school board, collected negotiating matters between the school board and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, review of closed session minutes, and individual student matters.
So moved. This is Veronica Nolan.
Second, this is Melissa.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Devereaux,
Yes.
Ms. Noland,
Yes.
Ms. Owens,
Yes.
Mrs. Porter,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Thomas,
Yes.
Madam President,
Yes.
motion approved 7-0.
Okay, we go to closed session now. So, good night, everyone that was not coming to close. It's good seeing you.